here, and I want to get a recap of the other trial that we have been following very closely here at Live Now with your guidance, of course, and that is Young Thug's Rico trial happening in Atlanta. So every Friday, we know that the judge has ordered a recess, but they were back in court yesterday. We did have some footage from that. Tell us where things stand at this moment.
They were. And yesterday was a busy day in court. We got through a number of witnesses, and we're starting to go through the indictment. And this is such a hefty indictment. The Rico conspiracy charge, the racketeering charge that alleges Young Thug's record label was basically a front for a criminal organization. That is kind of the mother encompassing charge of everything. And it actually encompasses 191 what are described as overt acts. And these can be crimes in themselves, or they can just be gestures or incidents that they say supports the theory that this is a criminal conspiracy. And prosecutors are starting to go through those overt acts and bring witnesses to support them. So we heard from a police sergeant with the Atlanta Police Department who described investigating a carjacking and driving through a neighborhood of known gang members and having some gang members brandish a gun and flash what he thought were gang signs at him. And that entailed a cross-examination that revealed he did not reveal in his report initially about this that he had seen gang signs. And of course, the gang signs are a major part of the case because they're trying to show that all these different activities were all tied together by the same criminal organization in the same gang. So the symbols, the gang symbols that are coming in are important to them to prove the case. So I think the defense attorneys are really trying to focus on the right things in their cross-examinations and to try to show that, maybe this was kind of an afterthought that he was flashed gang symbols. But then again, some people have pointed out that a lot of the stuff that they're going through is typical of gang members. While we see a red bandana flashed on the screen and the detective, the gang expert, is talking about its use in Georgia gangs. On the one hand, you see a red bandana and you think, well, I see those all the time. But I mean, the fact of the matter is those are used by Georgia gang members, and the way they're positioned is associated with gang members in Georgia. So the witnesses we've heard from in the beginning were establishing that. And now we're getting into the fact witnesses who talk about incidents that are actually charged in the indictment.
I want to pull up some more footage from the court yesterday because we actually did see Young Thug down there. Take a look at this, but kind of a different mood, if I were to say. So a couple of days ago, I had you on the program, and we saw him more smiley, a bit more optimistic. Here, he seems very solemn, his head down the whole time. Did that give you any kind of impression about what he must be going through at this moment?
I'm wondering if it's just a long day in court and him being in custody and the transport process that they have to do to get him over to the courthouse early enough. I can't imagine it's a pleasant experience. And then there's the long, kind of boring days of testimony in court. I noticed one incident where he had turned into his lawyer, Brian Steele, during the direct examination of I think it was the police sergeant. You could tell that Thug was just trying to talk to Brian Steele, and Steele had to kind of shush him because Steele was, of course, paying attention to the testimony because he's going to be doing the cross-examination of the police sergeant. So he needed to be paying attention. So I saw him he had to kind of brush Thug off. But I just think it's a long day in court for anyone. And then the conditions he's dealing with being in custody have to just exasperate it.
I do want to talk a little bit about the cross-examination that's going to be coming up in the future. I don't know if soon because there's so many witnesses you mentioned, hundreds of them that have been listed. But what do you think is going to be maybe the most difficult part for the defense when it comes to cross-examining some of these witnesses that have already been presented?
One thing I think is just the logistics of having 6 attorneys all kind of chomping at the bits to get a piece of these witnesses. And how are you going to organize that amongst yourself so that there's some unity in the messages that you're sending through your cross-examination so that the jury is kind of in tune with the narrative that you're trying to put forth? Because I realized that in the last answer, I'd said that I thought that Brian Steele was going to cross-examine the police sergeant, but then I just remembered that no, no, it was Thug's other lawyer, Keith Adams, who cross-examined the police sergeant, and Brian Steele was cross-examining another police detective who testified later. So just the logistics of keeping all those people straight and realizing who's doing what and where, and then to couple that with wanting to do an effective cross-examination to really kind of explore the notion that these are gang associated crimes, that all of this is somehow connected in a conspiracy. I think that really gives them a lot to work with and to talk about in their conference rooms every night.
Meghann, I want to bring up a moment that was a bit dramatic, if I should say, here in the courtroom that you did tweet about. Brian Steele holding this firearm, the judge saying, please point the muzzle always down, no matter if it's unloaded, okay? So tell me about this moment in court. I mean, it was a big deal, maybe one of the most standout moments from yesterday. Anything else that comes close?
And of course, it was a perhaps a light moment, but then I think the judge would take exception and explain that it's never a light moment when you're handling firearms. But it did lead to a lot of talk online about whether this was a good or a bad look for Thug's lawyer, and a lot of people were saying that there's a benefit to have a lawyer who appears to not know how to handle firearms, and he's defending somebody who's accused of being a gangster who deals in firearms. Somebody was arguing that it could be a strategic thing, but then others were arguing it's just a typical fumble in court. And I mean, the judge kind of had some fun calling him out on it, but he did make clear that the judge did when he said, "You're pointing it at Mr. Kearns. That's his court clerk." And I did have to send the clip to a friend who's a retired court clerk, and I said, "Of course, it was the court clerk he was pointing it at." And she's like, "Nope, always the court clerk. They're always getting the brunt of it."
Oh my gosh, and they're just there, kind of stand by watching this all unfold, just like the rest we are. Another big moment from this week was the fact that the judges, not the judge, excuse me, some of the jurors' faces, they were shown, circulated on social media. Any update on that? I know that there was concern regarding safety and the likes. Any more that you can tell us?
Definitely. I think that is an issue that is still fluid, that we could be hearing about in the days to come, the weeks to come, maybe even the months to come. But the judge did make clear that he doesn't want to bring this up to the jury. He even said that to the attorneys, he doesn't want to weird them out. The prosecutors yesterday morning were quick to raise this issue, said that they did not realize how widespread these photos are and how much attention they're getting. And they think it's a security issue for the jury. And the judge just said he didn't want to sit down the jury and tell them about this because he didn't want to weird them out. But he did emphasize that, of course, the jury needs to contact the court if they've been gotten any outside contact from anyone, if they're getting Facebook messages from people, if they're hearing from a family member, "Hey, we heard you're a juror on this case." And he told them at the end of the day yesterday to be sure to contact the court. It is a message that courts give jurors all the time, but he emphasized that it's particularly important if they have any kind of third party contacts contacting them, that they need to let the court know immediately. He named a court employee and then also said himself that they'll deal with this. So time will tell. I think it's alarming how widespread the photos are, and I think a lot of judges would take the approach that Judge Glanville did, where it's not a problem until the jurors start getting contacted, and then if the jurors say they can no longer be impartial because of it. But I also think this is a bit unprecedented in how widespread this is and how much attention is on this. And I don't think Judge Glanville or really other judges in the country would have that much experience with a jury security issue like this that's being exposed to tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of people every day, and they're still out there. Everybody could just find them right now if they wanted to.
I would say that those numbers are definitely up there, Meghann, because I log onto social media and it might just be maybe how my algorithm is, but a lot of people continue to talk about this case, the latest on the trial. Thank you so much again for joining us here. We always appreciate you, and we really rely heavily on your expertise when it comes to this case and, of course, other celebrity cases that we are following. Meghann Cuniff, we'll talk soon.
Thanks so much for having me.